Xylojantis, a surveyor, was traversing the desolate, ice-covered plains of the planet Cryos. His loyal canine companion, a genetically modified Arcturian hound named Zephyr, bounding ahead. The wind, a razor-sharp entity, tore across the frozen expanse, sculpting the snow into lethal yet mesmerizing formations against the fading light of the twin suns. The dying light cast an unsettling violet hue across the limitless white, transforming the crystalline surface into a sea of shimmering amethyst. Xylo adjusted his insulated envirosuit, appreciating the warmth it provided. At nearly 2 meters tall, with a physique honed by years of navigating the harsh frontier, he cut an imposing figure against the stark white backdrop. His dark auburn beard, kept meticulously trimmed despite his solitary existence, accumulated minute ice particles that glimmered in the dwindling light. "Come, Zephyr," Xylo called to the hound, his voice amplified by his suit's comm system. "We must return to the habitat before the gale intensifies." The hound, however, halted abruptly, head lowered and ears perked forward. Xylo recognized the posture instantly. Zephyr had detected something of note. The hound commenced pawing at the snow, emitting soft whines that escalated in urgency. "What is it, boy?" Xylo inquired, approaching to investigate the source of his companion's fixation. Zephyr's behavior grew more frantic as he delved deeper into the snowdrift. Xylo knelt beside Zephyr, his gauntlet hands joining in the effort. The wind's ferocity increased, driving icy shards against his faceplate, but he persevered. Zephyr's unwavering focus convinced him that this was no trivial matter. His fingers encountered something solid, yet pliable. Clearing away more snow, he revealed a hand, the skin a pale, almost luminous shade of cyan. "By the void." Xylo's heart pounded. He excavated with renewed vigor, uncovering more of the buried form. A slender arm, then shoulders, and finally, a face. Even in apparent death, she was breathtaking. Her skin was the delicate cyan of frost on polarized glass. Long, dark cerulean hair fanned out around her head, a frozen halo. She wore the remnants of a once elegant, ochre-colored envirosuit, now tattered and ice-encrusted. Xylo pressed 2 fingers to her neck, seeking a pulse. Nothing. Yet, her skin wasn't as frigid as it should have been after prolonged exposure to the elements. Could she still be alive? "Zephyr, assist me." He began clearing more snow from around her body. The storm's intensity was escalating, and he knew they would all perish if they remained exposed much longer. His habitat was a good 20 minutes away, even at a forced march. Making a swift decision, Xylo gathered the enigmatic woman into his arms. She was surprisingly light, almost ethereal. Zephyr pressed close to his leg as they battled through the deepening snow, fighting against the gale that threatened to knock them off their feet. By the time they reached his habitat, Xylo could scarcely feel his fingers. He shouldered the door open, grateful for the rush of heated air that enveloped them. The woman remained motionless, showing no signs of life, but an intuition urged him to persevere. He laid her gently on his sleeping platform and began removing her frozen outer garments. "Stay with me," he muttered, unsure if he was addressing her or himself. Zephyr watched from nearby, his tail wagging slowly, as if he understood the gravity of the situation. Xylo knew the fundamentals of treating cryostasis: warm the core body temperature gradually, prevent further heat loss. He wrapped her in thermal sheeting and, after a moment's hesitation, stripped down to his thermal underlayer and lay beside her. Body heat was the most effective treatment he had readily available. Zephyr joined them, adding his own warmth to the endeavor. Hours elapsed as the storm raged outside, rattling the habitat's reinforced plasteel windows. Xylo dozed intermittently, always maintaining contact, willing his warmth into her still form. A soft moan roused him. The woman stirred slightly, her eyelids fluttering. Xylo propped himself up on one elbow, observing intently as awareness gradually returned to her features. Her eyes opened, revealing irises the color of the deepest nebulae, a violet-black punctuated by points of light, like distant stars. She gasped, attempting to sit up, but Xylo gently restrained her. "Easy," he said softly. "You are safe. I discovered you buried beneath the snow." She stared at him, confusion evident in those remarkable eyes. When she spoke, her voice was barely a whisper, but the universal translator in his ear converted her words to galactic standard. I recall the gale. I was so weary. I only intended to rest for a moment." That moment nearly claimed your life, Xylo stated, unable to suppress a note of relief. I am Xylo Jantis. The furry rescuer who found you is Zephyr. A faint smile touched her pale cyan lips. Lyra, she managed. Lyra Valerius. Thank you for saving my existence. Before Xylo could reply, exhaustion claimed her once more, but this time, her breathing was steady and strong. He carefully adjusted the thermal sheeting around her and settled back, maintaining his protective position. Zephyr rested his head on the sleeping platform, his brown eyes fixed on their unexpected guest. Xylo scratched behind the hound's ears. Good boy, he whispered. Very good boy. Outside, the storm continued its assault on the frozen world, but inside the habitat, warmth and life prevailed against the cold void of the cosmos. The tempest raged throughout the night, but within Xylo's habitat, a different kind of warmth blossomed. Lyra's recovery progressed steadily. As the twin suns ascended, painting the snow-laden landscape in hues of amber and rose, she sat propped up on Xylo's sleeping platform, enveloped in thermal sheeting, while he prepared a hot beverage in the habitat's compact galley. Zephyr hadn't left Lyra's side since her rescue, his protective instincts fully engaged. She ran her slender, cyan fingers through his thick fur, marveling at the texture. We lack creatures such as him on my homeworld, she said, her voice gaining strength. Our companions are more ethereal. Xylo brought over 2 steaming mugs, handing one to Lyra. Careful, it's hot. It's a beverage from my homeworld, Terra, called Cough. I cultivate it in my hydroponics bay. She accepted the mug, her fingers brushing against his. The contact sent a subtle current through them both. Xylo noticed how her star-filled eyes widened slightly at the touch. Your temperature runs considerably warmer than mine, she observed, studying him with undisguised curiosity. My people, the Cygnans, evolved in a colder clime. We rarely experience such intensity. The way she uttered the final word carried an undertone that made Xylo's pulse quicken. He settled into a chair near the sleeping platform, attempting to maintain a professional demeanor. That explains your survival beneath the snow. A Terran wouldn't have lasted nearly as long. Indeed, but we are not impervious to the cold. Prolonged exposure can still be fatal. Lyra sipped the cough, her expression brightening. This is intriguing. The molecular structure appears to interact directly with our pleasure centers. Xylo chuckled. That's one way to describe caffeine, though I've never considered it in quite those terms. Terrans are remarkably adaptable, Lyra continued, her gaze traveling over his features with undisguised interest. You've colonized worlds across the galaxy, thriving in environments that would challenge even my species. And yet... She paused, seeming to search for words. And yet you maintain such warmth. Not merely physical temperature, but... She gestured vaguely, your emotions, your connection. The way you didn't hesitate to share your body heat to save a stranger. Most species would have calculated the risks, weighed the potential benefits against the dangers. Xylo shifted in his chair, suddenly acutely aware of their proximity. It was the proper course of action. Simple as that. Nothing about you is simple, Xylo Jantis. Lyra's voice had dropped to a near whisper. You intrigue me. My people are taught that Terrans are impulsive, driven by base instincts, but you... She set down her cough and leaned forward slightly. You display remarkable restraint. The air between them seemed to crackle with unspoken possibilities. Xylo cleared his throat. Speaking of restraint, you should rest further. Your body is still recovering. My body is doing precisely what it requires. Lyra's star-filled eyes held his gaze. Did you know that Cygnans possess a fascinating biological response to near-death experiences? Once we begin to recover, our systems flood with chemicals designed to ensure the continuation of our species. Xylo's mouth went dry. That's intriguing. From a scientific perspective. Oh yes, profoundly scientific. A smile played at her pale cyan lips. These chemicals heighten our awareness of potential mates, particularly those who have demonstrated genetic fortitude and protective instincts. Lyra, Xylo started, but she continued. It's quite remarkable how compatible our species are, despite our differences. Your higher body temperature, for instance, would create fascinating biochemical reactions during intimate contact. Xylo stood abruptly, needing to put some distance between them. You are still recovering. We shouldn't what? Lyra's voice held a teasing note. Discuss xenobiology? Or are you apprehensive of other reactions? He turned to face her, struck again by her otherworldly beauty. The morning light played across her cyan skin, making it shimmer like glacial ice. Her dark cerulean hair had dried into elegant waves that framed her face perfectly. I am apprehensive of taking advantage, he admitted. You've experienced a traumatic event. Lyra laughed, a sound like crystal wind chimes. Oh Xylo, your Terran morality is endearing, but unnecessary. My people do not share your concepts of trauma and recovery. We embrace life-altering experiences, particularly those that bring us into contact with fascinating new possibilities. She pushed the thermal sheeting aside and stood, revealing the form-fitting thermal undersuit she still wore. Her movements were graceful, deliberate, as she approached him. Zephyr watched with his head tilted, apparently unconcerned by this development. My body temperature has nearly normalized, she said, standing close enough that Xylo could feel the cool radiance of her skin. Would you care to verify for yourself? Xylo swallowed hard. This isn't merely the biochemical reaction you mentioned? That is a component, she admitted, but not the entirety. There's something about you, Xylojantis, something that calls to me on a level deeper than mere biology. She reached up, tracing the line of his beard with cool fingers. The touch sent electricity down his spine. Your restraint, your kindness, your strength. These are qualities my people value highly in a mate. Mate. Xylo caught her hand, but didn't push it away. That's a significant term. Is it? Lyra stepped closer, eliminating the last vestige of space between them. Tell me, why did you truly save me? Pure altruism? Or did something in you recognize something in me? The question hung in the air between them, heavy with possibility. Xylo realized he was still holding her hand, her cool skin warming slightly against his palm. The contrast was intoxicating. I saved you because it was right, he said finally. But I won't deny there's something here, something I don't fully understand. Understanding can come later, Lyra murmured, her free hand sliding up his chest. Right now, I'm more interested in exploration. Unless your Terran morality objects. Xylo looked into her star-filled eyes, seeing the genuine desire there, the fascinating blend of alien perspective and very human passion. His restraint, already stretched thin, finally snapped. Their first joining was akin to touching a flame to ice, a convergence of opposites that birthed something entirely novel. Her cool lips warmed against his, their disparate body temperatures forging an exquisite contrast that amplified every sensation. Zephyr, displaying impeccable timing, elected this precise moment to investigate his sustenance receptacle in the galley. The remainder of the morning dissolved into a haze of discovery and delight, as they explored their differences and similarities, unearthing unexpected harmony in their contrasts. Their union was both tender and passionate, a bridge spanning star systems that neither had known they sought until that instant. Later, as they lay entangled in the thermal sheeting, Lyra traced patterns on Xylo's chest with her cooling touch. Your heart beats more rapidly than mine, she observed. Everything about you burns so bright, so warm. Is that a favorable attribute? Xylo inquired, running his fingers through her star-dark hair. It's perfection, she murmured. You are rewriting everything I believed I knew about Terrans, about connection, about warmth. Outside, the storm had finally abated, leaving behind a world transfigured by fresh snow. Inside, two beings from disparate worlds had discovered their own transformation, one that would continue to unfold in ways neither could yet fathom. Days melted into one another like snowflakes on warm skin, as Xylo and Lyra established a comfortable rhythm within the habitat. The initial intensity of their attraction evolved into something deeper, more profound. Zephyr had fully accepted Lyra as part of their small family, often curling up at her feet during the long evenings they spent sharing narratives of their vastly different worlds. Tell me more about your hydroponics bay, Lyra requested one morning, observing Xylo tend to his plants. Her innate curiosity about Terran technology never ceased to amaze him. On Cygnus, we commune with our sustenance sources telepathically. Xylo chuckled, adjusting the nutrient flow to his cough plants. Terran technology is more hands-on. We've perfected these systems over centuries of interstellar colonization. Each plant necessitates specific conditions: temperature, humidity, light cycles. Lyra approached from behind, wrapping her cool arms around his waist. The temperature difference between them had become a source of constant pleasure, rather than surprise. Your attention to detail is captivating. Terrans possess such patience for mechanical contrivances. Speaking of details, Xylo turned to face her, noting subtle alterations in her appearance. Her cyan skin had assumed a peculiar luminescence over the past few days, and her star-filled eyes seemed to shimmer with new constellations. "You're different somehow." A mysterious smile played across her lips. "You notice everything, don't you?" "Yes, I am undergoing some changes. My body is adapting to our physical compatibility in unexpected ways." Xylo raised an eyebrow. "Should I be concerned?" "Quite the contrary." Lyra guided his hand to her abdomen, where a faint warmth radiated, unusual for her typically cool skin. "My species possesses a remarkable capacity to adapt to genetic potential. When we encounter a suitable mate, our biology shifts to accommodate successful reproduction." The implication struck Xylo like a blast of Arctic air. "Are you suggesting that?" "My body is preparing itself to carry a hybrid offspring, yes." Her expression was serene, but her eyes danced with excitement. "It's extraordinarily rare for Cygnans to achieve genetic compatibility with other species, and the fact that it's occurring speaks volumes about Terran adaptability and your particular genetic fortitude." Xylo steadied himself against the hydroponics console, his mind reeling. "But we've only been together for a brief period, and the biological disparities. Time holds little significance to my people when it pertains to procreation," Lyra explained, running her cool fingers through his beard. "When we recognize ideal genetic potential, our bodies respond accordingly. The changes I'm experiencing indicate that successful conception is not only feasible but probable." "And you're accepting of this?" Xylo searched her alien features, still amazed by how readily he could decipher her expressions despite their differences. "More than accepting. Among my people, this would be hailed as a remarkable achievement. A union capable of producing viable offspring across species is deemed the zenith of evolutionary success." She paused, scrutinizing his reaction. "But perhaps Terran perspectives differ?" Xylo inhaled deeply, processing the information. "Terrans typically favor more meticulous planning when it comes to parenthood. But then again, nothing about our circumstances has been typical, has it?" Lyra laughed, the sound akin to ice crystals chiming. "Your species thrives on adapting to the unexpected. It's one of your most alluring qualities." Her expression grew more serious. "However, there's something further you should be aware of." She led him to the habitat's main living area, where Zephyr immediately joined them on the comfortable seating arrangement. "Cygnan pregnancies differ from Terran ones. The developing offspring will necessitate specific environmental conditions, particularly in a hybrid situation." "What manner of conditions?" Xylo inquired, already mentally cataloging the habitat's environmental controls. "Lower temperatures, for one. My body temperature will continue to decrease as the pregnancy progresses. It's a natural process for us, but it might present challenges for you." Xylo contemplated the implications. "We'll need to modify the habitat's climate zones. I can maintain standard temperatures in my work areas while cooling the living spaces to suit your needs." Lyra's eyes sparkled with new starlight. "You would do that? Adapt your entire living space?" "Of course," Xylo squeezed her hand, marveling at how right it felt, despite the temperature difference. "You've adapted your entire biology for us. Some climate control adjustments seem like the least I can do in return." Tears, like minuscule diamonds, formed in Lyra's eyes. "This is why Terrans continue to astound us. Your capacity for acceptance, for adaptation, it's boundless." Their discourse was interrupted by Zephyr's sudden, alert bark. The hound rushed to the window, tail wagging excitedly. Outside, the aurora borealis had commenced its diurnal dance across the sky, but something was amiss. The lights appeared to respond to Lyra's presence, swirling in atypical patterns. "Another side effect," Lyra elucidated, observing the lights with evident pleasure. "Cygnan biology possesses a unique relationship with electromagnetic fields. During gestation, we can influence them unconsciously." Xylo watched in awe as the aurora performed an impossible ballet, creating shapes and patterns he'd never witnessed in his years on this planet. "It's breathtaking," he murmured, drawing Lyra close. "It's a sign," she said softly. "My people believe that when the sky responds to a life-bearing union, it presages great things for the offspring." They stood together, observing the light display, while Zephyr moved between them, offering his own warmth. Xylo realized that his life had altered irrevocably from the moment he discovered Lyra in the snow. What had commenced as a simple rescue had evolved into something profound, a bridge between species, a novel form of family, a future he'd never envisioned. Later that night, as they lay together in the carefully temperature-controlled sleeping chamber, Lyra traced the patterns of the aurora on Xylo's chest with her cool fingers. "I never divulged why I was truly out in that tempest," she said quietly. Xylo propped himself up on an elbow, intrigued. "I assumed you were lost, or your transport malfunctioned." "Not precisely." She smiled enigmatically. "My people possess predictive capabilities, not precise visions, but potent intuitions about where we need to be at crucial junctures. I knew someone significant awaited me out there in the snow. I simply didn't anticipate." She gestured to her subtly glowing abdomen. "You deliberately ventured out into a blizzard predicated on a feeling?" Xylo asked, incredulous. "Would you have preferred I hadn't?" Her star-filled eyes twinkled with mischief. Point conceded. He drew her closer, their temperature difference creating that now familiar, exquisite contrast. "Though next time you experience a predictive feeling, perhaps await more favorable weather." "Next time." Lyra laughed. "Planning for more life-altering encounters, are we? With you, I'm learning to anticipate the unanticipated." Outside, the aurora continued its celebration, painting the snow-covered landscape in colors that had never existed prior to their union. Inside, two beings from different worlds dreamed of the future they would forge together, a future that would redefine what was conceivable when love transcended the boundaries of species and space. The metamorphosis of Xylo's habitat into distinct climate zones proved more arduous than anticipated. While he labored on installing advanced thermal barriers between chambers, Lyra's body temperature continued to plummet, her skin assuming an ethereal, crystalline quality that captured and refracted light in mesmerizing ways. "The environmental controls in the sleeping chamber are now stable," Xylo announced, wiping perspiration from his brow as he finished calibrating the final sensor. The chamber maintained a crisp -5 degrees Celsius, comfortable for Lyra's altering physiology, but necessitating him to don thermal gear whenever he wasn't generating significant body heat through other activities. Lyra glided into the chamber, her movements more fluid than ever. The pregnancy had amplified her natural grace, making her appear almost weightless. "Your ingenuity continues to impress me," she purred, her cool breath visible in the chilled air. "Most species would deem such adaptations insurmountable." "Terrans are stubborn that way," Xylo replied, admiring how the frost patterns on the windows seemed to mirror the increasingly intricate designs appearing organically on Lyra's skin. "We perceive impossible situations as personal challenges." Zephyr padded in after Lyra, his thick coat now supplemented by a heating vest Xylo had designed to keep him comfortable in the colder sections of the habitat. The hound had become exceptionally protective of Lyra, sensing the precious life developing within her. "Your persistence is one of your most alluring qualities," Lyra murmured, closing the distance between them. Despite the chamber's frigid temperature, heat bloomed wherever their skin made contact. "Along with your remarkable capacity to generate warmth." Xylo drew her closer, savoring the exquisite contrast of their body temperatures. "Speaking of warmth, how are you faring? Any further developments I should be apprised of?" Lyra guided his hand to her abdomen, where a subtle pulse of energy thrummed beneath her crystalline skin. "The offspring grows stronger daily. Its genetic structure is stabilizing in fascinating ways, assimilating the optimal traits of both our species." "Care to elaborate?" Xylo inquired, intrigued by the alien sensation beneath his palm. "Well," Lyra's star-filled eyes sparkled with amusement, "it appears to have inherited your thermal adaptability. The embryo is maintaining its own temperature gradient, independent of my cooling body. It's quite unprecedented." Xylo processed this information. "Is that safe for you?" "More than safe, it's perfection." Lyra's expression softened. "My people have long theorized that successful hybrid offspring would necessitate both parents' evolutionary advantages, your Terran capacity for environmental adaptation, combined with Signin energy manipulation. She trailed off, distracted by Xylo's thumb tracing patterns on her skin. And these patterns. He gestured to the intricate frost-like designs that now covered much of her visible skin. They're beautiful, but I've never witnessed anything analogous. They're birthing marks, Lyra elucidated, her voice assuming a husky quality. They manifest when a Signin mother's body is preparing to channel significant quantities of energy. Traditionally, they're considered quite attractive. Is that so? Xylo's voice dropped lower as he traced one of the patterns with his finger, causing Lyra to shiver despite her cold-adapted physiology. Very much so, she breathed. In fact, the marks are most sensitive when... She gasped as his warm hand followed the pattern up her arm. Zephyr, displaying his customary impeccable timing, determined this would be an opportune moment to investigate the galley's warmer climate. Later, as they lay entwined in specially designed thermal blankets that maintained their ideal temperature differential, Lyra traced the frost patterns that had temporarily transferred to Xylo's skin during their passion. You know, she mused, on my world, this would be deemed a remarkable sign. The patterns, the fact that your skin can temporarily accept our markings, it's another indication of Terran adaptability. Most species would suffer frost damage from such intimate contact with a Signin during gestation. Xylo chuckled. I'll accept that as a compliment. You should. Lyra propped herself up on one elbow, her hair cascading down like a frozen waterfall. Though I must confess, these ongoing adaptations present certain challenges. Such as? Well, she bit her lip, in a gesture she'd adopted from him. Signin pregnancies typically last a mere 3 months, but given the hybrid nature of our offspring, we're in uncharted territory. The rate of my biological alterations suggests accelerated development, but my body's demands for energy, particularly thermal energy, will continue to escalate. She traced a finger down his chest, leaving a trail of frost that swiftly melted. Which signifies I'll require more frequent contact with your heat. Xylo caught her hand, bringing it to his lips despite its Arctic temperature. I believe I can manage that challenge. I surmised you might say that. Lyra's smile turned mischievous. Though you should be cognizant that, as the pregnancy advances, my temperature will plummet even further. We'll need to be creative about maintaining contact. Creativity is another Terran specialty, Xylo murmured, drawing her closer despite the intense cold radiating from her skin, along with generating heat. Their laughter mingled in the frigid air, creating minute ice crystals that captured the light like diamonds. The following morning, Xylo awoke to find the sleeping chamber transformed. Lyra's influence on the environment had intensified overnight, creating elaborate ice formations that spiraled across the ceiling and walls. The patterns mirrored those on her skin, transforming their sleeping quarters into a crystalline cavern of extraordinary beauty. Apologies for the redecoration, Lyra said sheepishly, observing him examine the alterations. The offspring's energy is becoming more challenging to contain during sleep. Xylo touched one of the ice formations, astonished to discover it warm despite its appearance. Don't apologize. This is incredible. He turned to her with a grin. Though we might need to reinforce the structural supports if this persists. Always thinking practically, Lyra teased, but her expression was replete with admiration. Most would be unnerved by such manifestations. Unnerved? This is amazing. Xylo's enthusiasm was genuine. Our offspring is already demonstrating its capabilities. Speaking of which... He placed his hand on her abdomen, feeling the now familiar pulse of energy. Have you given any deliberation to nomenclature? Lyra's expression turned pensive. On Cygnus, we typically await parturition to name our offspring. The name is selected based on the energy patterns they exhibit. She covered his hand with hers. But perhaps we could amalgamate our traditions, select a name that honors both lineages. I'd appreciate that. Xylo drew her into his arms, no longer registering the cold. Though we should likely concentrate on reinforcing the habitat first. At this rate, we'll be residing in an ice palace by the time the neonate arrives. Would that be so dreadful? Lyra's eyes twinkled with mischief. You did state Terrans can adapt to anything. That we can, Xylo concurred, kissing her despite the frost that formed on his lips. That we most certainly can. Outside, the aurora borealis had become a constant presence, responding to the burgeoning life within Lyra. The lights danced across the snow in patterns that matched those on her skin, transforming their corner of this alien world into something magical, a place where the impossible became feasible, where love truly could surmount all barriers, even those of biology and space. The final weeks of Lyra's pregnancy transformed the habitat into a spectacular crystalline sanctuary. Ice formations pulsed with internal warmth, responding to the growing life within her. Xylo had reinforced the walls with energy-conducting panels that channeled the surplus power into utilitarian systems, converting their home into a self-sustaining marvel of hybrid technology. "Your engineering prowess rivals that of our most accomplished builders," Lyra observed, watching Xylo adjust the latest installation. Her body temperature had plummeted to levels that would flash freeze most liquids, yet the patterns on her skin glowed with an inner fire that defied the cold. "Necessity breeds innovation," he replied, securing the final connection. His thermal suit hummed quietly, shielding him from the extreme cold that now pervaded most of their living space. "Though I never anticipated converting crystalline energy into power for my cough maker." Lyra laughed, the sound creating delicate ice chimes in the air. "Speaking of unanticipated developments." She guided his hand to her abdomen, where the energy pulses had grown potent enough to create visible auroras around her body. "The little one is exceptionally active today." Xylo felt the familiar surge of wonder as their offspring's energy responded to his touch, warming despite the Arctic temperatures surrounding them. Zephyr, who had taken to sleeping pressed against Lyra's side, perked up at the activity, his heating vest glowing softly in the crystalline light. "The birthing chamber's prepared," Xylo stated, referring to the specially designed room where their offspring would enter the world. "Though I'm still astounded by how rapidly everything has progressed." Cygnin pregnancies accelerate when conditions are optimal. Lyra's star-filled eyes sparkled with meaning. "And thanks to your enthusiastic participation in maintaining those conditions, our offspring has developed faster than even I anticipated." Xylo felt heat rise to his face, despite the cold. Their need for frequent intimate contact to balance their temperature differentials had led to some creative solutions, each more exhilarating than the last. The contrast between his heat and her cold had become an intoxicating dance of opposites, creating energy patterns that fed directly into their offspring's development. "The traditional Cygnin birthing ritual necessitates a perfect equilibrium of thermal energies," Lyra continued, trailing frost patterns across his chest through the thermal suit. "Ordinarily, this is achieved through intricate technological means, but we've managed something far more organic." "Organic is one term for it," Xylo murmured, recalling their latest temperature balancing session that morning. The ice formations in their sleeping chamber still bore the imprints of their passion. Lyra's expression turned thoughtful. "On my world, this would be celebrated as a legendary union. A Terran not only surviving intimate contact with a gestating Cygnin, but actually thriving on it. It defies all known biological limitations." "Perhaps that's because your people never truly afforded Terrans an opportunity," Xylo suggested, drawing her closer despite the extreme cold radiating from her skin. "We're remarkably adaptable when appropriately motivated." Motivated, indeed. Lyra's cool lips brushed his neck, sending shivers down his spine that had nothing to do with temperature. "Though I must confess, your particular brand of motivation has surpassed all my expectations." Their interlude was interrupted by a sudden pulse of energy that rippled through the habitat, causing the ice formations to glow with internal light. Zephyr barked excitedly, sensing the atmospheric shift. "That's novel," Xylo observed, watching as the aurora borealis outside intensified in response. "The offspring is establishing its own energy patterns," Lyra elucidated, her voice filled with wonder. "It's combining your thermal adaptability with Cygnin energy manipulation in ways I've never witnessed." She paused, placing both hands on her crystalline abdomen. I believe it's nearly time." Xylo's heart raced. "But I surmised we had another week, at minimum." "The little one appears to have inherited your impatience as well," Lyra teased, though her expression was serious. "We should proceed to the birthing chamber. The energy accumulation will be substantial." As if to emphasize her point, another pulse rippled through the habitat, stronger this time. The ice formations commenced to sing, creating harmonics that made Zephyr howl in response. Xylo scooped Lyra into his arms, marveling at how light she felt despite the advanced pregnancy. Her body had become almost ethereal in the final stages, as if she were transforming into pure energy contained within a crystalline shell. The birthing chamber, upon their entry, began to respond to Lyra's presence. The meticulously arranged energy conductors pulsed in rhythm with her respiration, creating a cocoon of balanced temperatures. Zephyr assumed his position by the door, standing guard as he had been trained. "Recall what we discussed regarding the ritual?" Lyra inquired as Xylo assisted her onto the specially prepared platform. "Maintain physical contact to balance the thermal exchange, irrespective of how extreme the temperatures become," he recited, taking his position beside her. "And continue transmitting warm thoughts about Kaf and tropical beaches." Lyra's laugh metamorphosed into a gasp as another energy wave surged through her. "Your humor, even now, it's so perfectly Terran." She gripped his hand tightly. "Promise em meeting." "Anything. When our offspring inquires about how we met, relate everything. How you discovered me buried beneath the snow, how you shared your warmth without reservation, how your Terran heart was capacious enough to love someone from another world." Her star-filled eyes locked with his. "Relate that occasionally, the most frigid moments can culminate in the warmest beginnings." Xylo leaned down to kiss her, disregarding the frost that formed on his lips. "I promise. Though I believe the evidence will be quite perspicuous, considering they'll likely be capable of creating ice sculptures with a thought and surviving both Arctic and tropical conditions." Speaking of which, Lyra's body commenced to glow with intense energy. "I believe our little hybrid is prepared to make their appearance." The birthing chamber filled with swirling patterns of heat and cold, forging a perfect balance of extremes as their offspring prepared to enter the world. Xylo held tightly to Lyra's hand, marveling at how a simple act of rescue in a snowstorm had culminated in this moment, a moment that would alter not only their lives but perhaps the understanding between their species for all eternity. Zephyr's howl joined the harmonic resonance of the ice formations, creating a symphony of celebration that echoed across the frozen landscape. Above them, the aurora borealis erupted in a display of unprecedented beauty, announcing to the world that something extraordinary was about to be born, a child of fire and ice, of Terra and Cygnus, of love that defied the cold void of space itself. The birth of their son, whom they named Kairos, meaning one who bridges worlds in Lyra's native tongue, transformed the birthing chamber into a spectacular aurora of swirling energies. As the final surge of power subsided, Xylo and Lyra gazed in wonder at their perfect hybrid child. His skin shimmered with a subtle iridescence, neither purely Terran nor entirely Cygnan, but something magnificently unique. His eyes, when they opened, revealed the same star-filled depths as his mother's, but with flecks of warm brown that mirrored his father's gaze. He was already mastering thermal control, his skin temperature shifting to match whoever held him. His hair, a fascinating blend of his parents' colors, seemed to shimmer with its own inner light. The habitat stabilized in the aftermath of the birth. The ice formations now pulsed with a gentle, steady rhythm that matched Kairos's breathing. The temperature variations, once extreme, settled into a comfortable gradient. Kairos, already demonstrating his unique abilities, created miniature auroras around his fingers. He seemed to be reshaping the landscape outside, creating microclimates where both Terran and Cygnan life could thrive. "He's building bridges," Lyra explained, "just as we did. Every barrier between our species that was thought unbreakable. We shattered them all, through the power of love and Kaf," she added with a wink. Xylo agreed, "And your people never truly understood the adaptability of humans," which earned him a playful nudge. Xylo, holding Kairos, reflected on his initial thought of a simple resus, and now they stood, holding the future of not only their lives, but that of two races. He told Lyra, "I'm so grateful that Zephyr chose that spot. Sometimes, the coldest of moments can lead to the warmest of futures," she replied. Outside, the aurora borealis continued its celebration, an eternal testament to the bridge they had built. Their corner of the planet began a new chapter, where two different species could not only survive but also grow. In their warm bed, Xylo and Lyra held their miracle, proof that love could always find a way. A love that started with the most simple of rescues and became something so much bigger. As they fell all asleep, they understood this to be just the beginning of a brand new adventure. An adventure where being buried in snow could lead to the warmest kind of awakening.